Every year, I do a segment or just a list of segments following the NFL draft on one of my favorite topics in all of sports, fantasy football. Fantasy football is something I've been doing since 2015, and it's really fun. And it's one of the ways I'm able to engage not just with the Dallas Cowboys, which is my favorite team, but other teams around the leagues, teams that I hate, teams that I have no opinions about, some teams that I find very interesting. I'm able to understand rosters, I'm able to understand talent simply because I decided to engage in one of the most fun activities that is connected with the National Football League. And again, for season 3, we are doing my review for your fantasy football draft, which is, of course, way out there, way out of line. We are going to be starting now and moving our way closer to the season. The March to the 2025 NFL season starts now. And with this comes the first episode of our fantasy football team review, except we've done it by teams, we've done it by divisions. This time, we're simply doing it by positional reviews, but this is not a simple position. You see, the NFL draft happened roughly around 2 weeks ago. In the first round of the NFL draft, I saw probably one of the lowest amount of skilled position players that I've ever seen. This is the quarterback, the running back, the wide receiver, and the tight end. 10 total players in the first round fits those descriptions. Normally, I see a lot more. This time, not so much. And one of the things that has always tried to cross my mind is, would I take a risk on a rookie? So, in today's episode, we're going to be looking over the 10 first-round draft pick players that will be able to make their mark on fantasy football, and we're going to be separating them into categories based on draftability and free agency. The way we're doing this, a few rules I want to set before we get started. First of all, this is going to be standard scoring. That is without question. No PPR. I understand a lot of people do PPR leagues, but we're not going to be doing that. This is standard scoring, and I had to look over a few sources and just kind of understand the offense in order to see if I would draft these players or not. And the 4 categories that we're looking at is I would draft this player and start them. I would draft this player but sit them. I wouldn't draft, but they would be on my free agency board. I pay no attention to them whatsoever. Without further ado, with the understanding of what scoring we're doing, understanding who we're talking about, and understanding the categories in which they're going to fall under, this is episode 6, the first episode of our fantasy football review. I hope you guys are excited. My name is Aaron, and this is the Game Day Hour, where we started our channel. So we're in the fantasy football tier. We started using the tier list in season 2, and we're going to continue on that in season 3. And again, we have the categories off to the left: draft and start, draft and sit, high free agency, or neither. And the 10 players we're going to be looking over include Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty, Tario McMillan, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, Emeka Egbuka, Omarion Hampton, Matthew Golden, and Jackson Dart. Let's get started. Let's see what I have to say about these people for fantasy football, starting with the first overall pick, which was Cam Ward, picked by the Tennessee Titans. Cam Ward is an incredible talent. Miami, he put over 4,313 passing yards, along with roughly 43 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, with a 67.2% completion rate. Miami finished just outside of the college football playoffs, but in his one and only season, he finished as the Heisman finalist and enough to earn him the first overall pick. His situation in Tennessee is interesting. He does have a good set of weapons. In the backfield, he has Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. For wide receivers, he has Calvin Ridley, who's been there for a year. And then he also just got Tyler Lockett with Traylon Burks as the number 3 and Chico Okonkwo as the main tight end. He actually has a very strong core, but Tennessee again last year, poorly coached, finished last. Offensive line is still in the works, but it's getting there. The situation for Cam Ward, more or less, it's like this. There are so many quarterbacks who I would definitely draft early on. Is Cam Ward close enough to just being draftable, but you would probably just sit him? Of course, in my fantasy draft, we had 2 quarterbacks that did get drafted, which were Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Daniels turned out to be amazing. Cam Ward is in a situation where I like his weapons, I like his talent, I think he's a great and potentially a well-coachable player. If it were me drafting, Cam Ward, if he were to be drafted, would probably be a late 13, around 14 and 15. Now keep in mind, I'm working with 10 players, so if we're looking at a 10-player draft, snake draft, 1 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 10, so on and so forth, with just a certain amount of positions open, I can see Cam Ward being drafted, but he would sit. You're not going to play him over a Patrick Mahomes, over a Jaden Daniels, or a Joe Burrow, or Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts, so on and so forth. You're not going to play him over these people, but you'd probably draft him very late as a potential risk play. You would probably sit him for the majority of the year, kind of analyze how he is, and then when the bye week comes around for your main starter, this is a great time to play him, see what he does. He has good weapons around him, of course, and then that's as far as I would take him. Most of the time, he probably would end up in high free agency, but I think his talent is enough to give him the draftable position. Again, very late, just a shallow draft. For Cam Ward, he sits, but somebody I would draft. With the second overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars selected Travis Hunter, the two-way superstar from Colorado. Now, Travis Hunter had himself a great 2024 campaign. Obviously, he was the Heisman finalist. Offensively, he had 96 receptions, 1,258 receiving yards, that's incredible, and 15 touchdowns. That earned him, along with his defensive stats, which I'll just go ahead and say it, but it wouldn't show up alone for his fantasy, only for the defense of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had 35 tackles, 11 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. He was exceptional. Now, the Jaguars recently just released Gabriel Davis, which was an interesting move. I wish they kept him. Travis Hunter, under that circumstance, would have been the third wide receiver on the depth chart, because I still think Gabriel Davis is a very solid wide receiver, and of course, Brian Thomas had a standout rookie season. For me personally, Hunter, who now sits at the number 2 spot, is in a little bit of a predicament. I understand some people out there would draft, because the prospect of having somebody on your team, a lot of people would take that risk. I've seen those risks be taken by wide receivers who've been drafted a little bit lower. Like I've seen it with Justin Jefferson, though drafted the 26th overall pick by Minnesota. It's interesting to see how certain people think when they draft, and I bet you some people would definitely take a risk on Travis Hunter, but because of his two-way status, because of the fact that he's probably not going to take as many snaps as he probably would want on the offense, he is somebody that I would have as a high free agent. I don't think I would particularly draft him unless, and this is a big unless, and this is why I like Rashid Shaheed for New Orleans, is if they not only use him on offense and defense, but special teams. I've started to see that special teams, especially in my league, I don't know about the standard scoring league, but in my league personally, special teams players have very high draft prospects. And because of that, he would be somebody I would draft and sit. But in a standard scoring league, I would probably just go ahead and sit him on free agency. They're probably going to be a little bit more run heavy with Travis Etienne. They're probably going to use Brian Thomas a lot more than Travis Hunter. Hunter is probably going to do a lot more damage on defense. With the offensive availability, you'll have those moments where he has those 70-yard plays, so just shooting right out the gate kind of scoring. That's how I see Travis Hunter, but those I feel like will be rare in his first season. I might be wrong. But for now, he is a high free agency. I wouldn't draft him. Keep a close eye. I know some people will draft him, and maybe they'll strike gold. Who knows? With the 6th overall pick, the Las Vegas Raiders selected Ashton Jeanty, the second in the Heisman finalist running back from Boise State, who put up some ridiculous stats in college. Here's the thing. Over 2,600 rushing yards, which was 2,750 all-purpose yards with 29 touchdowns. Ashton Jeanty, oh my god. He was so fun to watch. I was surprised he didn't win the Heisman. But what is his situation now with the Raiders? Well, first of all, let's go back to Boise State. Who was their toughest competition throughout the year? They had Oregon, and then they had Penn State. They had other teams in there, but mostly from their conference, which Jeanty just steamrolled over. But when they came to Penn State in the playoffs, Jeanty didn't put up his greatest performance, and Boise State got smashed by the Nittany Lions. And so I look at this Raiders offense. First of all, they don't have a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. The number 1 right now is Jacoby Myers. So that's already a big concern. Geno Smith is their quarterback, which I don't know. They're going to probably want to be very run heavy with Ashton Jeanty. They're probably going to use Mostert as a good 2-back system. And because of Genty's skills, it's obviously something that you would draft. But is he enough to be a starter? I think he does have the bell cow capability of being a starter in the NFL. Does his O-line hold up is the question. The Raiders' O-line last year, I look up and down it, and there's just so many gaping holes that are issues. And the question is, can that defense also hold? they have some really good defenders up there. They made some waves in the draft, and obviously they kept Max Crosby. But my biggest concern is, will that defense be able to give Genty kind of positions to, have those high-scoring fantasy games? I think if any player in this set of players has the ability to be drafted and started, it would probably be Genty. I would probably get him somewhere in the rounds 4 through 7. If you're trying to play, like, I want to have a heavy wide receiver team with a really good quarterback on my fantasy roster, and you're not necessarily leaning into the I'm going to be a run first, because I don't think Genty is going to be a top 10 running back, at least in the first year. He's going to make waves, and he's going to give you the impression that in like the next 2 or 3 years, he's probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. And because of that, I do think he's draft and start, but he's going to be a late starter, maybe even a flex position. So with all of just the Raiders offense as it is, obviously it's still growing. They're going to probably make some big moves in the next draft to continue to bolster up that offensive line. And if they do that, that's a big move for Genty. That's a big move for his career going forward and for fantasy prospects. He will be just a late starter, draft and start, 4 through 7. That's kind of where I see him being drafted. Some people will probably take him a lot earlier. That's just me. I would probably be more inclined to take running backs who have already proven that they can make up some big points in this league and have pretty good offensive lines. Obviously, I got the first overall pick, and I'm just shuffling between 3 players right now, really 4, and I'll just go ahead and give you. It's Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, and Jamar Chase. Those are the 4 I'm right now wrestling with the first overall pick. Genty, I would probably he'll start, most likely then, but I'm not enthusiastic about it just yet. Next up, we have Tyrell McMillan, drafted 8th overall by the Carolina Panthers. This was an interesting move. I thought the Panthers would have gone defense, but it's fair. Bryce Young had a good second half of last year and potentially has the marks to take a big leap in this third year as long as he has the proper weapons. In his former room, he had Adam Thielen and rookie Xavier Legette, who is now going to be moving on to the second year of his career. And then with Tyrell McMillan, who put up some monstrous stats in Arizona. This is crazy. 84 receptions, 1,319 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, 15.7 yards per reception. In fantasy football, that makes waves. Especially in my league, where a receiver gets 1 point for every reception they get, basically. It's not PPR, but I would get 1 point if my receiver had over 10 receiving yards. Basically, if McMillan had 9 catches, it'd be over 10 points. And so I look at the situation now with Carolina. He's already bolstered up as the wide receiver 1 on the depth chart, which is kind of crazy. I thought it would have been Legette, then Thielen, then McMillan, but they already have McMillan at number 1. So if we're looking from that perspective, that he will be the number 1 wide receiver, is there a good running game to fall back on? That's debatable. Chuba Hubbard is pretty good. I think he's fine, I guess. Jonathan Brooks, who I think will eventually take that starting role. These Texas running backs are just crazy. And the Cowboys just got one too. Is there enough balance for McMillan to strive? I think there is enough balance. But think about the amount of wide receivers though. There are so many superstars in this league. So I don't think McMillan's going to take that big jump to be drafted and started, but I think you can draft him late. I say after round 10 probably. And you'll be able to sit him, use him, maybe if he starts to blow up, use him as a flex, and if he actually starts to put up consistent numbers each week, make him a full-time starter. I think he's in that position to just take a big leap in the first year, but where it stands now, he is somebody I would just sit in the draft. I wish the Cowboys got him, but I'm not going to hold on to that. But yeah, I like McMillan being here in the draft and sit position because 15.7 yards per reception, that right there is a fantasy owner's dream. But this is the NFL. A lot of things are different. So we'll have him here for now. The Bears were in the top 10, the 10th pick. They chose Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan. This was a shocking pick because Tyler Warren was still on the table. And to me, I would rather have Warren than Colston Loveland. But I'm going to give respect where respect is due. Colston Loveland at Michigan put up 56 receptions, 582 yards, 5 touchdowns in his year with Michigan 2024. And he's going to be joining a tight end room that also has Cole Kmet. And I really like Cole. He's not the flashiest tight end. Maybe it's just because he's a Notre Dame guy that I like him. But with Chicago, he's always been a very reliable weapon Justin Fields, for Caleb Williams, I feel like he's reliable and he's always somewhere in the tight end 1 and 2. But keep in mind, and by the way, some people in the shorts criticized me for kind of downgrading how big of a move this is based on the offense that Ben Johnson would run. Ben Johnson loves to use 12 personnel, is what I've been told, which would also include 2 tight ends. So Colston Loveland would be used just as much as Cole Kmet, which means that he would have opportunities to get a lot more touches and a lot more receiving yards. So I hear what everybody's saying with there, and yes, I get it. Person who criticized me for saying Cole Kmet, I get that I messed up. It's Cole Kmet. But even with a 12 personnel offense, and I'm not questioning Ben Johnson, he made Detroit look so fun to watch, and normally I never like watching Detroit. They were so entertaining. I wish they made the Super Bowl. With Chicago's offense, if he is indeed going to run this 12 kind of offense personnel, I can make an argument that Colston is a draft and sit kind of guy. I don't think he can be tight end 1 early on, and neither do I think, and I'll just go ahead and say, I don't think Tyler Warren will be either. The only reason why I'm not budging on the fact that I wouldn't draft him is even with that 2 system. You look at all the personnel around Caleb Williams, he has a really solid wide receiver. I really like DJ Moore, and I think Rome is going to take another step forward. And with the offensive line getting better, you're going to see a lot more gains in the run. I think that the tight end position, though used effectively, if it's going to be shared amongst those 2 tight ends, I don't think I would draft Colston, but let's say that come week 5 and he has way more touches than Cole Kmet and he's like averaging somewhere in the ballpark of 8 catches, 70 yardish, maybe like 50 to 70 yards, then I would say, maybe I'll pick this guy up and just sit him for now in case, my tight end gets hurt or, he has his bye week. And then I would probably play. I'm really curious, actually. With all those comments in my shorts, I'm very interested to see how Chicago's going to play with Ben Johnson. That's going to be something I'm very curious about, and they made some really good gains in the offseason. They worked on that O-line very well. So I'm interested to see what they do. He's so far a high free agency, I wouldn't draft him just yet, but I can understand if someone picks him up and then just goes off of him. But we'll see. That remains to be seen. But 4 picks later, the Indianapolis Colts selected Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Now, Tyler Warren, to me, was in the same conversation of draftability as Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers. Now, some people will find that controversial, but when I saw him play against Notre Dame, I saw somebody who was supposed to be tackled for like a 5-yard loss and almost got a first down on a run design play where the tight end was taking the snap. Now, that's just odd. That's odd. That's weird personnel. But when you look at his stats, because he has some unbelievable stats. Look at this. Receiving, he had 104 receptions, 1,233 yards, 8 touchdowns. But rushing, he had 218 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also has a touchdown passing. He had 13 total touchdowns from 3 different avenues. So he put up so many great stats at Penn State. He's arguably one of their best tight ends in a long while. And now he's entering an Indianapolis team that desperately needs someone like him. Anthony Richardson right now is in a very dangerous position of being released by the Colts because of how he played in the second year. I understand he was coming off of injury, but that Texans game in which he sat down was it wasn't really because of injury, it was because he was tired. That was a very bad look. So he has a lot. The Anthony Richardson has a lot he needs to prove, or else they're probably going to move on. And if you look at their quarterback room, it's not the most impressive thing in the world, but they got Daniel Jones. They had a really late draft pick with Riley Leonard, which is something I find interesting. I doubt he'll start, but I would love to see it. My Notre Dame guy. And then he has some competition at the quarterback position, and they're not confident in him. So what does he have around him on offense? Well, he has pretty good interior offensive line. I don't know about the exterior. I think it's still in the works. But the O-line is, I guess, I'd say, comparatively to all other offensive lines, I'd give him a better opportunity, a better chance. Running back, he has Jonathan Taylor, which, of course, one of the top backs in the league, without question. His wide receiver room is meh, and his original tight end wasn't great. Tyler Warren fills in a big spot. He's probably going to be a security blanket for Anthony Richardson, and I think this is something that Richardson needs desperately, something reliable. It's probably not the most flashy player, but he is reliable. And because of this, I understand some people think that I'm being too high on this guy, but I am still somebody who I would draft. I would sit him down, obviously. There's many tight ends in this league that I would much rather have than Tyler Warren. but I think he is good enough to be drafted. If you just pay attention to his Penn State 2024 season, you'll understand why I'm high on this guy. Same thing as Brock Bowers when he was at Georgia, now with the Raiders, and he's like the Raiders' #1 weapon. It's going to be interesting to see what Las Vegas does there, but with Indianapolis, I think that this was a much-needed pick. I'm shocked that he fell to their position. That right there is the steal of the draft, without question, in the first round. Now, you can make an argument that whoever got Shador Sanders in the 5th round probably got the steal, but the Buccaneers, with the 19th overall pick, picked Emeka Egbuka. Now, I was shocked that he wasn't going to be a first-round prospect when I was looking over who was most likely going to be drafted in the first round, rated high. I was kind of shocked that he wasn't there, but then the Buccaneers picked him up at 19th, so I was like, okay. Emeka is, oh, of course, he's like all Ohio State wide receivers. They're above average in almost everything they do. Let's take a look back. At Ohio State, he had 1,011 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, and keep in mind, he wasn't the only guy there. Ohio State just breeds wide receivers like LSU and Alabama does. It's crazy to see what they're able to do there. And again, another exceptional player. And now with the Buccaneers, this is what you have. He's 3rd on the depth chart because he's not going to jump Mike Evans or Chris Godwin immediately. But as a 3rd, Baker Mayfield's going to have himself a year. This is the opportunity that we'll probably see the best season from Baker Mayfield, and if we don't, that'll be so disappointing. The Buccaneers made so many moves in the offseason and in the draft. I really love their draft. I mean, their 2nd pick, Benjamin Morrison, I love that pick. I think that the Buccaneers, if Baker Mayfield can take that next step, you can argue, it's not a clean argument, but you can argue they're Super Bowl contenders. Just saying. Which is hard because you still have the Eagles, you still have the Commanders, Detroit's still there, Minnesota's making some crossroads, and the Packers are also there. The Niners, when healthy, are there. The Rams are also there. So that's tough competition, and Atlanta's coming up too. But I think that Tampa Bay is really close to being considered a Super Bowl contender if Baker Mayfield can make that next step forward with every weapon he has, because forget the wide receiver room. They got Bucky Irving, who is a fan favorite in Tampa Bay now after his year. He was on stud. That was one of the more entertaining seasons I've watched from a running back in a while. I know that's kind of crazy to say because Saquon Barkley had an amazing year last year, McCaffrey 2 years prior, but Bucky was very fun to watch. And then O-line I still think is very solid. There's a really good opportunity for Emeka to grow, but he's kind of in the situation as Jackson Smith-Jigba was a couple years ago when they had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in Seattle. Because of the fact that he is a wide receiver 3 on the depth chart, he's somebody I wouldn't draft be high free agency because obviously Mike Evans is there, Chris Godwin is there. I do think that somebody will try to pick him up in the draft, but probably sit him. I don't know what they're going to do with Egbuka, but I like what Tampa Bay is cooking up. It's really nice. Maybe he'll make some steps forward in the depth chart. Obviously, Mike Evans getting up there in age, Chris Godwin is too. But for now, in 2025, he's a high free agency pick because of his position on the depth chart. It's not going. The Chargers had the 22nd overall pick. I thought they were going to go defense, but instead they picked up the running back from North Carolina, Omarion Hampton, to go in a backfield with recently acquired Najee Harris. Hampton had himself a great year at North Carolina. 2,033 all-purpose yards, along with 17 total touchdowns, 15 on the ground, 2 in the air. Hampton is interesting. It was an interesting pick by the Chargers, who I've looked at their free agency as something odd. Great pickup at the running back position with Najee. Letting go of Joey Bosa was a stink. That's why I thought they were going to go defense, but they went with Hampton because he somehow fell into their lap. He's a great running back. I think he's going to make some crossroads in the league and probably take over as the Chargers running back #1 in the future, but the Chargers are going to be running a 2-back system with Najee and Omarion Hampton. Now, that still gives some leverage to be drafted. I've seen people draft Jaylen Warren in my league. He was the backup running back in Pittsburgh when Najee was there. So I've seen it happen. This is probably going to be no different. Hampton is somebody... It's really interesting how the Chargers may use him, actually. I don't know if he'll be more of a proponent in the pass game, but I think that maybe it's a really late draft pick. Rounds 14 and 15, I think that's where you'll see people pick up Hampton. I think that Najee will probably be drafted somewhere in between rounds 6 through 9. And Hampton, if you want to believe that the Chargers are going to have this really good double back system, then you're probably going to pick him late. But if you think that Najee Harris is probably going to take on the bell cow role, then he's probably a high free agency. But this is probably where I just kind of see, what are the Chargers going to do? I think they will run the two-back system, which is why I will say he's draftable but sitting. And you look at the rest of the offense, the Chargers offense is still trying to figure out its identity under Jim Harbaugh. Quarterback Justin Herbert, obviously, he made some waves. He actually wasn't drafted in my league. He barely even was on a roster in my league last year, which is kind of crazy to think about. To be fair, he didn't have many weapons to work with. But now you see a lot of these players who are going to be coming back for a second year who are going to probably be way better. So the passing game will balance things out. They made some moves at tight end position through free agency, getting Conklin from the Jets. So with this offense being as balanced as it is, I think Hampton is going to get his own. I think that he'll have enough to play as a potential flex on a down week, but he is somebody that I don't want to call him a high free agent because I think he has so much potential, especially on that Chargers offense, but definitely not a starter. He's not Genty level. It's a very murky pick. I understand if you think this is not a great situation if you wouldn't draft him, or if you think he's much higher. I just don't know how the Chargers are going to run with him, but if I think, and I think they will, run a two-back system, I think he's an extremely late draft pick. But if they run with Najee as a bell cow, then high free. The draft hosts, the Green Bay Packers, did something they haven't done in a long time. Draft a wide receiver in the first round, and they chose the Texas boy, Matthew Golden, who was supposed to be second on the wide receiver depth chart as far as draftable wide receivers this year in the NFL draft, and I had him going to Buffalo. But the Packers, I'm glad they actually made this move, because I do think that the wide receiver core for Green Bay is one that is balanced, but nothing really flashes to me. I understand a lot of people are high on Jordan Reed or Romeo, and I just don't, they're not that impressive to me. As far as fantasy football perspective. Now, probably Jordan Reed. I've seen him have some really big games. Romeo has some, but there's not like a clear-cut number one in my eyes. You can basically say many wide receivers should be number one. With those two, Matthew Golden can also be considered somebody who could be a number one. Right now, I believe he is a wide receiver 3 on the depth chart for Green Bay. And when you look at his stats from Texas last year, 58 receptions, 987 yards, 9 touchdowns, averaging 17 yards per catch, which is a step upwards from Tatari McMillan. I think that because Jordan Reed is really good at balancing the wide receiver core from Jordan to Romeo to potentially Golden, Christian Watson, and they also picked up some other wide receivers late in the draft. I think that the Packers are going to use Matthew Golden in a way that would make me consider him a high free agency, but somebody I wouldn't draft necessarily. And the only reason why I say I wouldn't draft is because of how balanced it is. And not only that, but you have a great running back in Josh Jacobs, the tight end in Tucker Kraft, and then the Packers, and the way coaching goes under Matt LaFleur, everybody's going to get a piece. Everybody's going to get a piece. But because of that, I don't think there's going to be super significant stats for me to draft Matthew Golden with a late pick, even if he's there. So I would make the argument that he's a high free agency pick, not enough for me to draft in fantasy. And lastly, the Giants traded back up into the first round to draft Jackson Dart at the 25th overall pick, trading with Houston. Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss quarterback, 4,279 yards, passing 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Rushing, he had 495 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. He put up some major stats at Ole Miss, and Ole Miss's offense was just firing on all angles. And Jackson Dart, to me, is a quarterback who I believe will be a starter in this league. The Giants have made 3 different quarterback moves this offseason, including Dart. Before, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, who both signed relatively around the same time. So here's the thought process if you're the New York Giants. You're going to sit them for a year, maybe 2. Let them learn under Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And when those guys move on, because let's be honest, they are not full-time options for New York for more than probably a year or 2, Jackson Dart will get his chance. And with Malik Neighbors as your wide receiver and a running game that doesn't have Saquon Barkley, but does have some pretty good pieces to the offense. With all of this combined, Jackson Dart in future years, I think would be somebody you want to keep an eye on in your fantasy drafts. But for this year, I think it's a no-brainer that he is neither a high draft pick, low draft pick, or a high free agency, because he's most likely not going to start at all. So I wouldn't waste my time there. but keep an eye on how the quarterback situation looks in New York. Really, the whole offensive situation, just the whole New York situation. Everybody knows the Giants have made some pretty significantly stupid moves over the years. This could work. I'm surprised they didn't get Shador. I understand why Shador dropped not as far as he did. I think that the 5th round is kind of insane. For somebody who is cocky but not a criminal, I'm shocked that he fell to the 5th round. Mostly, people who drop in draft stock is mostly due to a video or rumor that goes out that would question their, not personality, but as far as like their character. And all it is with Shador Sanders was he was extremely cocky. His dad was Deion Sanders, and I understand that's a turnoff, not a 5-round turnoff. To finish off with Jackson Dart, I think that it's going to be interesting how New York uses him when he does start, because I think that he has a really good capability of being a dual threat. At Ole Miss, he was able to do a lot. But again, don't worry about drafting him. He's probably not going to start in the first year, or he might later down the road, but I don't know if he would be a high free agency. So assume he's not going to start at all. But a year and 2 years from now, let's come back to this conversation. And that'll do it for all the draft picks. The only one I would draft and start is Ashton Genty, but pretty late. The one I have no desire to look at all is Jackson Dart because of his situation on the depth chart. Draft and sit people include Cam Ward, a very late draft pick, Tatario McMillan, who I would say of all could be the earlier of draft picks, Tyler Warren, who I think is going to be somewhere between rounds 11 and 15, and Omarion Hampton, an extremely late draft pick, depending on how the Chargers use him. High free agency picks, I say Travis Hunter's not draftable just because I don't know how often they're going to use him, and I don't know if they're going to also use him in the special games as far as like kick returns, punt returns. Matthew Golden, because I don't know where he sits on the depth chart, and the Packers tend to spread the ball around a lot. Colston Loveland, because even with Ben Johnson as the head coach, I still think that Cole has a very high probability of just getting more touches than him. And even if they get the same amount of touches, they have such a far range of the offense that I don't think he'll have enough points to make a difference. And then Emeka Egbuka, because he is 3rd on the depth chart, and he's sitting behind Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which put up high statistics. This is the first of many episodes regarding fantasy football and my opinions, what I hope you guys would take away when you start looking into your fantasy draft. And that'll do it for today's episode. I thank you guys so much for watching. I thank you for the support, by the way, that I've been getting. The last episode had hopped over 130 views, being my most viewed episode of my Season 3 campaign so far. I thank you guys so much for the support, getting the 135 subscribers, and having shorts that are now hopping over 900 and 1,000 views. And with all the support that I get on the shorts, even the comments, even if they're harsh comments, I did actually try to take a lot from what people said, especially with the Bears and the Colts. I did want to incorporate just what people have said just a little bit, just so you guys know I am looking at the comments and I am trying to analyze what everybody says. So I hope that helps, and I hope you guys appreciate that. The next episode is not going to be the most glamorous episode, but it's going to be one that I think is going to be interesting to look at, and that is fantasy football kickers. I'm going to set it up like this. We're going to do kickers, then defense, tight ends, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1, running backs, with the quarterbacks being the last episode of our fantasy football journey. So I hope you guys are excited for this, as I am, because I'm very excited to continue doing this series. And I hope you guys enjoyed. If you do, please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe, and go follow me on all my social media. And yeah, that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.